a world within our world. They've created a world unlike any other world.
Dungeons and Dragons. And a game like D&D fuels their imagination and makes them feel special.
The ogre is amused by your joke and allows you to pass.
Dad, I'm just curious. What is it about Dungeons and Dragons that suddenly leapt out at you at age 60?
Dungeons, it'd be the dungeons.
Just what I love about role-playing games is being told exactly what to do.
Me too. You should introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to 93.3 CFRU, and allow me to open up the Spellbook. My name is Mike the Birdman, and this is the show that is dedicated to the tabletop role-playing game hobby. Whether you are fighting the evil Decepticons, whether you are preparing to face Tiamat, or perhaps you're playing a My Little Pony with the cutie Mark Crusaders in Equestria, it's time to roll them dice. But I'm not alone as I trek through the vast libraries of TTRPG material that have been printed for so long. I'm joined from the Feywild of London, Ontario, Canada.
Hello there, I am Damien. Some of you may know me as Magical Hack, and yeah, I'm here.
All right there, guys. So in this edition of the Spellbook, we are going to be talking about being more than a stat block. But before we do, this coming weekend on June 27th is Free RPG Day. So check out your friendly local game stores in the area, and they will have all sorts of giveaways and free things. Some of the people that are supporting this year are people such as Catalyst Game Labs. You're also going to have Ed Studio, Evil Genius Games. Free League Publishing is going to be giving a free peek at some really cool stuff. We're also going to get stuff from Magpie. I think they're the same people who do Masks, if I'm not mistaken. There's a Marvel Multiverse role-playing game sneak peek for the I think it's the Secret Wars book that comes out later on this year. Renegade Game Studios has got some new stuff. They just had their recent Renegade Con last week where they made some pretty big announcements. You should probably go check that out. The Story Engine, which is a wonderful deck building, or not really deck building. It's a story generator where you take prompts, you'll get like a noun, a verb, and a setting, and all sorts of other crazy things. And it's really great for writing. I've actually used it in a couple of my other kind of projects. It is one, as far as I know, it's mostly Canadian. I think it's actually based over in Kitchener. We actually interviewed them on TWIG a couple of years ago, and they are wonderful. You should definitely check that out. But make sure you're going down to your friendly local game store. Check that out. If you want to see if there's a participating retailer near you, you can go to freerpgday.com. Check some of that stuff out. These guys sent me a press package this year. I got another lovely, expensive ass D20. I'm always big thankful for them. Over the years, they've given away minis for Ravenloft and Dragonlance. I've seen really awesome adventures. There's always a really cute indie game, like little zine that shows you these little one-page RPGs. Some of them are really interesting. I think there was one year where you had to be a trash panda and like a cat, and you were trying to build airships out of garbage. It's really weird, but that's what I love about Free RPG Day, because it showcases the creativeness of this imaginative industry that I'm so glad me and Damien are a part of, and it's been a really good time. So now that I've done that pitch, once again, check out freerpgday.com. Find a participating local retailer near you. I think the Dragon is doing it here in Guelph, I do believe. So go check them out on Saturday. That being said, it is time to talk about today's topic, because it's one of those things that comes up in conversation more often than not. I encounter this when I run into power gamers, or gamers who want to play TTRPGs like a board game. And honestly, there is a time and place for something like that. But Damien came up to me with this topic a couple weeks ago, and I'm so glad you did, because I really feel this is a teachable moment, a teachable topic, and it's being more than a stat block. So Damien, how do you define being more than a stat block?
Well, it's having more than two dimensions to your character. Now, me saying that's going to sound harsh, and it's not meant to be as harsh as it sounds. But being the, you know, I am barbarian, I swing big sword. If that's the speed that you want to play at, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done that. There's a good chunk of my early TTRPG experience that was basically my grasp of the hobby. But being more than a stat block is adding in motivation, adding in a reason for your character to exist in the world. And not just why they're on the adventure. That's going to be your plot hook. That's going to be your big buy-in. But what is your character all about?
Yeah, when I look at a stat block, again, there is a video that I saw years ago, and it talked about old school AD&D. So AD&D second edition or even AD&D first edition. And back in those days, you used to roll your stats in order. So you take 3d6, not 4d6, drop the lowest, not point by, and that was your character. And when I took the logic of that, where I had a one-shot weekend with my friends. I don't want to out these people, so let's call them Alan and Brandon. So I'm playing with Alan and Brandon, and I said to them, okay, we're not doing point by, nor are we doing 4d6 drop the lowest. My friend Alan immediately is like, what? What if my character sucks? And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to make you roll 3d6 in order, but you are going to roll 3d6 and you can assign your stats however you want. If you get something below a 6, fine, you can mulligan that, but you can only do it twice. Okay, fine. And he got a character, and he's like, I don't know, Mike, I don't have anything above a 14. I'm like, okay, so you are perfectly average, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's work with that. And when I started looking at that, I saw it being more than a stat block. I see that as the hallmark of the power gamer. And there is completely a spot for power gaming or min-maxing or optimization in many TTRPGs, especially in D&D 5 and 5.5, even Pathfinder or D&D 3.0 and 3.5. Optimization was really a thing. And in many other role-playing games, there is a certain way to get maximum benefit for minimum risk. And that's fine. However, that's not role-playing in my mind. That's mathematics with a goblin, so to speak. And I'm not into that. Like, the video that I watched years ago on this was saying, what if I have a fighter who has a strength of 8, for example? We'll use D&D as our primary example today because it's the system most people get. But what if I have an intelligence of like 15 or something? Okay. You would think you'd be suited to being a wizard, and you probably are. But your heart is really set on being a fighter. Why can't you be a smart fighter? Right? Like, for example, John Wick, right? I wouldn't call him particularly like muscle bound. I would call him extremely dexterous with a really good constitution, but he's really smart. Or another character like, I guess, Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible. That guy has impossibly high stats. But he also has very human weaknesses as well because he's not perfect. And I think that's the thing when it comes to being more than a stat block. Your flaws make you interesting.
100%. And like one of the things that I like to say is, and I've said it before, failure in TTRPGs in general, failure is where fun can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And those weak points for your character, to use a recent example from our game, the not last session, actually even last session and the session before, every time you would look at me and tell me to make a wisdom save. My response to you was, "Why do you hate me?" Because that's my character's worst save. And it's not that, I was being salty. Like, I was having a great time, but it's those things that it adds a little bit more tension to the gameplay. And that's going to be a lot more fun than, at least to me, and I'm assuming to Mike as well, than, having a character that's like, "Oh yeah, you're going to hit me with this and you miss. And it's now my turn and I'm going to hit you with my big sword. And oh yeah, I'm going to divine smite. And oh, hey, I one hit the bad guy. Yay." There's a time and place for that. And that's fun in moderation.
Yeah, because when you play with what is essentially a cheat code, certain games lend themselves to that. Like, for example, sometimes I play video games with easy mode on or whatever because I just want to see the story. I just want to have fun, where the gameplay is very secondary, but the stories is what I'm really here to see. But in a role playing game, you don't necessarily have that luxury. And when you cheat yourself out of the possibility of failure, where are the stakes? Like, your character needs to have consequences. Like, I play in a game with, again, my friend Peter. I play a druid. I have gone down to like 2 death saves before, and I literally was in the bargaining stage of grief. I'm like, "Hey man, what if I do X?" And actually, I can think of one example where my character was more than a stat block. I was a shapeshifter in one of their games, and my character died. And I was like, "Oh man, I don't want to let this go. I don't want to let this character go. She's so cool." And he's like, "Okay, let's work something out." I'm like, "Okay, what are you talking about? Like, what if your character changed classes? You still get to keep your levels, but you're changing classes." I'm like, "Okay, what do you mean?" "Become a warlock. You just made a deal. Now my stats are completely not warlock good. They suck as a warlock. But I get to live another day. But now there's a price for my failure." And I think that's so much fun because I'm not just, 15 dexterity, 19 constitution, and like, I don't know, strength 18 or whatever. I'd be an awesome barbarian, but I'm a crappy warlock with like a charisma of like 10. Right. I'm sure my +0 to hit with like Eldritch Blast and my spellcasting abilities gonna go really well.
Just be a hexblade.
Yeah, and it's like, I love the idea of making flawed characters because they're interesting. And one of the best systems that I think ever did that in a certain way was Shadowrun, at least in an early edition. There was a book called The Shadowrunner's Companion. And what that did is it introduced the point buy system for that particular game. But it also gave you something called edges, which is pretty self-explanatory, but there's also flaws. Again, pretty self-explanatory. But some of these flaws were pretty catastrophic. Like, maybe your character is not as magically active, or if they don't receive proper treatment, they take extra damage. Or in the worst case scenario, you have a bomb in your head. It's going to go off. You'll be dead inside of a year, but have 15 points to play with. Now your character, you can drive it like you stole it. But sure, you have all these points, but what's the consequence if you try to correct that flaw? Do you go out in a blaze of glory? Do you get lobotomized? You don't know. Speaking of things you don't know, we got to take a break here, right here on CFRU 93.3. This is the Spellbook. I'm Mike. That's Damien. We're talking about being more than just a collection of numbers on a sheet. And we're going to give you some pretty cool insight into that as we continue over the course of the next 45 minutes here on Guelph Community Radio, where we all gather for laugh, fun, and a little bit of dice rolling. We'll be back, guys, right after this.
Hi, my name's Karen, and you're tuned into Guelph's volunteer-programmed campus and community radio station, CFRU 93.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Spellbook, right here on 93.3 CFRU Guelph Community Radio, as we talk about ways to make your characters and NPCs more than just a stat block. So one of the ways that, as we were talking about before we cut to a little bit of a break there, to do that is to embrace your bad score. You no character outside of maybe John Wick or Ethan Hunt or any of the like stereotypical action movie stars really show too much weakness, and that's all well and good for that setting. They're human, but at the same time they're superhuman. However, interesting story development tends to happen more when you have a flaw or you know, a secret or something that you have to overcome or get past. Maybe, Boblin the Goblin that your party befriended early on in the campaign, maybe they have a past. You know what I mean? Maybe they're more than just the goblin hanger on. And that's something that you as a GM can start kind of peppering into the story and into the game. And it could lead to side quests. It could lead to, a change in the party dynamic that could make things more interesting.
Yeah, like one classic fantasy character who I think that has a lot of flaws but overcame them is Riceland from Dragonlance. This sickly cough that was killing them. They had to drink this special coffee or tea or some elixir to keep them from basically hacking their lungs out. That's a sign in gameplay of a really low constitution score, probably with some complications on top of that. Yet they were able to overcome that eventually, so much so they challenged the goddess of evil in Dragonlance, if I'm not mistaken, and won. But it took a long time to get there. And even like speaking of like all these like action heroes, I'm trying to think if there are any characters that are the action hero type that are really good at one thing, maybe weak in another. I got to thinking about that. I'm thinking maybe Jack Reacher. He's really smart. He's a competent combatant, but maybe not so lucky at times, but he's like a Sherlock Holmes sort of thing. And even then, Sherlock Holmes has a flaw. Yes, he's really smart, but he's not great with people, right? So tremendously high intelligence and wisdom, but probably not a great charisma score. Probably just enough to charm people, but not enough to, be Don Juan de la Nooch. Something like that.
I was gonna say his flaws were the illicit substances, but
yeah, like that too. And like you have to look at like some of the popular characters in fiction. Like even when I look at, say, Lord of the Rings, like I'm trying to think, I guess Bilbo, or not Bilbo, I guess Frodo, if we looked at him, I don't have a stat block in front of me. I could look up the Free League Press version, but I'm thinking, I would argue if we're using the traditional D&D spread, probably pretty low strength, moderate dexterity, average intelligence, maybe higher than average intelligence, but not super high, probably about a 14 at most, average wisdom, and probably pretty high charisma. But everything else is not great. And Frodo, for example, gets the crap kicked out of him. How many times does he get stabbed or, taken out or just whatever? Yet Sam, not so much.
I would say Frodo would probably have like a 16 constitution.
Yeah, because, he
Like
survives being stabbed. But
yeah, that is his superpower, is he has a high constitution. Everything else, yeah, I would say for him would probably be about pretty average. But as a character, he was able to do great things.
Yeah. And he was able to rely on his friends, because Sam at one point in the movies and in the books is like, Mr. Frodo, I can't carry the one ring for you because I can't carry that burden. But what I can do is carry you. So that's another character complementing another's weakness, because you have to have that built into your games. I mean, even in our group that we're currently kind of playing with right now, you've identified you're a weak wisdom score, but other people like our Haragon cleric would reasonably have a fairly high one. And our satyr is our I think they're our party face. I think they've got a ridiculously high charisma, but they're not a very good ranger. As we mentioned in our last episode, they're good in an urban environment. And that's a flaw too. Like, you're not going to be everything in every, you're not always going to be the master chief in every possible scenario. And that's perfectly fine, because that's where adventure happens. Adventure, sure, Superman wins most fights that he's in, right? That's cool for being 10. Even Batman, as much as he's the world's greatest detective, he doesn't lose very often. It has to be a ridiculous set of complications. Honestly, his real weakness is, I was going to argue Bruce Wayne, but I'd argue Batman's the real weakness, because everybody knows who he is, and he has so many people gunning for him. He has ridiculously high stats, but socially, Gotham doesn't trust him. The police don't like him outside of Jim Gordon.
Yeah, that is fair. Though I was gonna say Batman's weakness is his spine, but
yeah, but it's like, it's like when you look at like superheroes, like I'd say Spider-Man. Again, you look at a character like him. What is his biggest weakness? He's likable, despite having a really high charisma. He jokes at the wrong times. Like, for example, when, like, I don't know, Doc Ock is throwing, I don't know, the sun at him or whatever, he's making quips, and that's all well and good. Well, maybe not necessarily taking the situation super seriously, but his real weakness is guilt.
Yeah.
Because he let a moment of selfishness. That's what got Uncle Ben killed. And when you build your characters in these RPs, I'm not saying you have to be full of tragic backstory flaws, but that's maybe something to consider, is give your character a little bit of tragedy, but don't do the "my parents are dead," because that's so lame. But if you can make it work, go for it. But don't just be the numbers on your sheet. That's so boring. When I think about playing with my friend Alan and he was upset that he couldn't hit anything, I'm like, okay, well, clearly martial prowess is not going to carry you through this fight. Are you smarter than what you're fighting? Think about it.
Oh, exactly. And so it's one of those things that you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of the character that you're playing. And not just for backstory reasons, but also your character's current motivation. And and I'm kind of glad that you brought up, it's having a kind of tragic backstory is not all that bad. You're right. It's good to have a little bit of tragedy in your backstory. Now, on the flip side from that, for those people who don't necessarily want to have, tragedy in their backstory, maybe they wanted to come from a loving home, and their character is adventuring because they want what makes you more than a stat block in that case should be your character's motivations through play.
Yes, 100%. Because again, if you're, Sally well-adjusted and Jimmy Goodhome and you go out to fight evil, okay, why? I want to be rich. Okay, why? Like, do you have some debt you want to pay off? Is your family in trouble? Is somebody sick? Do you just want to do good things? Are you a paladin? Do you want to give money to your church of choice? Do you want to help your community? Or are you simply just a greedy prick? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
those are all valid reasons. Some more than others, obviously, if you're being a heroic individual. But um, hey, I'll even use Tinker again as an example here. Their backstory, they came from a well-adjusted home. There wasn't really any tragedy. They they got the blessing from their parents to leave and all that, and it's all well and good. But their reason for going out into the world is they want to make something. They want to leave their mark in the form of some sort of invention or technology. You know, their magnum opus, typical crafter. And that's kind of the underlying thing that drives them to continue adventuring because, around that next bend, maybe they'll find a new material. As I spoke to you about my plans for our current quest that we're doing, my character's going to try and make it so that they can have a base in the Feywild, so that they can try and gather some materials from there that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And that's leading into who they are and who they want to be in the
Yeah, because
which
like when you create a character, because your character has a long-term goal. It's not just a short-term. Short-term is like, can I make a deal? Long-term is like, okay, I'm not just building a device, I'm building a legacy, something that impacts the world when that character may not survive. But if that character passes away into legend at some point, they've now left an imprint that will last throughout that campaign world should that game continue. And I think that's more important than having an 18 in strength. That is something that is measurable. That is something that is long lasting. It's something more than doing crit damage in one combat one time.
Yeah, exactly. And like even to continue on with the example with the Fey Pact that some of us in the group got. We get to choose a cantrip, an enchantment school cantrip. I chose what was it? Uh aha. I have my character sheet right here. Encode thoughts. It has absolutely no combat potential, but it's a narrative thing that's something that I think Tinker would have received as a flash of genius when when having this pact applied, because it helps kind of craft who they are as a person, and it helps develop who they are as a person.
Yeah, because your abilities are a reflection of you. Like, for example, my one character of Fox Singer that I play in my friend Pete's game, I asked my DM for something. It did give me a game boost, but I asked him if I could have it because I kept inserting it into my role play. I chose, can I have defeat Chef? He's like, really? Why? I'm like, how many times do I say, oh, we're going to make camp. I'm going to go get food. I'm going to maintain everybody's gear. I'm going to make sure that when first light breaks, everybody's got breakfast. Everybody's gear is secured. We're good to go. He's like, all right, I like that. But that also means I can create a series of treats, basically Rice Krispie treats, more or less, that give a little bit of a boost to temporary hit points, that can fully restore healing during our first short rest or something like that. And its narrative, yeah, it gave me a boost to my wisdom. Cool, but that's not why I took it. I took it because it was a fun role play thing, because my character wants to be helpful. He likes to cook. And I get a chance to show off some of my Gordon Ramsay thing, and I can throw out fun terms like, now I'm blanking on it, but if we ever come across seafood, like, oh yeah, here's how we break down a mud crab or something like that. Like, that's really fun. Like, yeah. Or identify these plants. I'm like, okay, I watch a lot of Naked and Afraid. I know what that plant does. I know what that plant does. Can I apply this real world wisdom into the game? And my game master, like I said, Pete's like, yeah, that's awesome. Can we do that? Like, yes. But we're going to talk more about being a stat block, making your characters come to life right here on 93.3. This is CFRU. I'm Mike, that's Damien, and we will be back with more right after this.
Hey folks, it's your girl Amarawa, and I run a show called Radio Perg. So Radio Perg is our weekly spoken word show on CFRU 93.3 FM, Guelph's campus and community radio station, where we showcase the exciting work OPERG is doing and talk about current issues in the community related to social and environmental justice. Generally, the show consists of recorded talks, live and pre-recorded interviews, spoken word pieces, and music. Listen to us on Thursdays from 3 to 4 p.m. at 93.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Spellbook right here on 93.3 CFRU Guelph Community Radio as we talk about becoming more than a stat block. Before we left, we were talking about ways that you can through play make your character more than just, a list of numbers on a sheet. And one of the things that I was kind of thinking about while we took that little break there, tool proficiency. Speaking specifically towards D&D right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, in none of the 5e games that I've played, does anybody really use any of their tools outside of maybe thieves. Those are the only ones that ever really get any play because, you come across locks and traps and all that fun stuff, and you have to get rid of them. It makes sense. But, what about, your character, your bard has proficiency with instruments. Why not bring that in? Your artificer has smithing tools. That, outside of any mechanical use, that's something that you can use to, maybe you're helping maintain the party's armor.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think you and our damn peer are the only people I've ever seen use tools because I believe our damn peer has cartography skills.
Mhm.
And I remember a number of times they've mentioned because they have an ability, it's built into their class, or maybe it was a feat they took. But it's like, I always know which way north is. And they often work with you in particular. I've noticed, like, we are making a map. I want to know where we're going. That is so useful. And it's not a combat thing. Like, when we talk about being more than a stat block, I'm so glad you mentioned tool proficiencies and stuff like that, because everybody looks at their stats and like, okay, where are my combat buffs? Obviously, very important because that's fun. We all want to, punch the monster in the face and, kick Vecna down the friggin' stairs. But not everything is melee combat or range combat or throwing down spells. Sometimes it's like being in a town, figuring something out. Sometimes it's being by the campfire. Or sometimes it's even just having a one-on-one role play session while your friends listen in and you're giving that character depth. And while you look at a character like, say, Conan, for example, which I will admit I haven't read the latest Marvel series by Jim Zubkovich. Conan, to me, as far as I understand, is a very shallow character, about as shallow as like a pool. And that's fine. That's cool. Conan hits things. That's what he does. But a character like John Wick, for example, while being amazingly superhero awesome, has a lot of depth to his story and a lot of unique skills and abilities. Like, he does a lot of recon when he does stuff. When he was the Baba Yaga, he had to know how to get into places. He had to understand, okay, who do I talk to? Who do I have to spend the currency of the high table to get information on? Stuff like that. And that made the character of John Wick interesting. And heck, even to look at his background, for example, he was in this super assassin. Cool, we get it. What brought him back in? They killed his puppy and they stole his car. And that is on the surface, that is a really dumb motivation. But he became a one-man wrecking crew and destroyed part of the New York City Russian mafia in the course of maybe 2 nights. Like, the timeline of those movies is a little ridiculous when you really break it down. But it's something that made John Wick interesting. And he wasn't just gun-fu, gun-kata the entire time. There were different skills in there. And just the weight, the amount of times he would bring out his phone to look at his wife, That's an important character motivation. Again, John Wick is ultimately death on 2 feet and a tailored suit, but something carries that. He had a good life. He got out when it was impossible to get out. And because he couldn't let it go, Winston even said, Jonathan, if you step one pinky back into this world, you're not getting back out. And he's like, I know.
And yeah, like you need to, whether you're doing it via backstory or current motivation, you need to kind of find those things that are driving your character forward. Because, and I've basically said it before, in the world they're inhabiting, they are a fully realized person. They're, not just, you know, +6 to hit with magic weapons.
Mm-hmm.
They have their dreams, they have fears and worries. And that's something that can be so powerful if you apply it when it comes to your role play.
You actually just made me think of the 2 classes, maybe 3 that are, okay, 4. I thought of 4 classes that are very driven by personal motivation. What do I mean by that? The bard. What? The guy who walks around with the lute and is horny? Yes. Now, that's a stereotypical bard, which is kind of ridiculous. I'm not a big fan of that stereotype. We'll do a full show breakdown on character classes at some point this year. But when I think about the bard, a lot of people don't know I'm a spoken word artist. I do poetry slam here in Guelph at Guelph Spoken Word, usually every 3rd Saturday of every month. And as of this recording, I don't remember. Did I go last week? I don't remember. Anyway, point of the matter is, a bard has to create stories. A bard has to learn how to create songs or create epic poems or limericks or rhymes or whatever. That's not just, oh, look, I am suddenly Ernest Hemingway. No, you're going to have to sit there and you're going to have to write. You're going to have to go through drafts. You're going to have to become an artist. And that's something very important. Like, creating art doesn't just happen. And even in the Bard's flavor text, they talk about using the voice of creation, the words of creation. That's something you have to listen to. And not every bard is necessarily a singing bard. For example, I'm starting in an AD&D game, and I asked my friend Nick, I'm like, hey, can I play it as an epic poet, as a storyteller? I'm taking my Indigenous history as an Indigenous Canadian, as an oral storyteller. I'm like, can I be an Indigenous keeper of knowledge? And from what I can tell, they love that idea.
Well, exactly. That is, that. So if you look at Norse mythology, or even like the Norse culture, I should say, the skull.
I knew you were going to say that.
They were effectively the bards of that culture, and they were storytellers first and foremost. Yes, a lot of them could sing and play instruments and whatnot, but the core of what they did is they told stories. And I actually recently watched a Pointy Hat video about bards, actually today. And a bard is so much more than singing or playing an instrument. Any sort of performance. And like even back in the day in like the 3 and 3.5 era, one like the bard that I wanted to make at that point was the heckler. Like basically that was their
Don
performance.
Rickles, basically.
Yeah, like essentially all they did for their performance abilities was they would just insult the opponents and things like that. And like is actually our friend Oliver who gave me that idea. and like it's just so awesome, and it's a different way to flavor that class. That's more than what the player's handbook says it.
Yeah, and another great example of a character class that is built heavily about more than just their stats, it's the cleric. What do I mean by that? They are a class that is devoted to a religion, a faith, a practice, a code, and how they manage to manifest that. Well, if you worship, this is something I've never come across in any of my games, maybe one, maybe, where somebody knows the pantheon of their world. And I'm not expecting you to be a theological expert in Faerun or Dragonlance or whatever. But if you're going to be a cleric, what does your faith look like? And again, I'm not expecting you to say, oh, I am celibate. I do 12 Hail Tears in the morning. I drink a bowl of water from the sewer, but only after I purify it to show that I am of the land. No. I just want to know, what does your faith look like to you? Or a paladin. And you've seen me do this in our game with our friend Skittles. And I say to them, what is your paladin oath? And they still haven't answered that to me. And that's going to come bite them in the ass, because I know they're looking at their thing as a combat buff. Now, as a DM, should I be vengeful? No. But I should encourage you to think about, if you're going to play a class that is, I feel, more heavily roleplay focused, that's important. Because, like, if you are an Oath of Vengeance paladin, okay, cool. What does that mean? Or, this is something I applied to how I play monks, for example. A monk is your Gokus, your Ong from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's Jackie Chan. Whatever. But monks have the spiritual ability to focus their ki, which is their inner reserves of energy, which allows you to power your monk abilities. I took that one step further when I played in a game with my friend, let's call her Bethany. I had my character become part of an order called the Cloakwood Monks, and I built up a hierarchy of how our characters are named, how we practice our thing, and how we get to our subclass is we have to go out into the world and find what focuses our ki. For example, if you're a Way of the Four Elements monk, which is the elementalist class where you get like fire, acid, and cold damage based to your attacks, okay, how do you manifest that? Or if you're a Way of the Open Hand, that's your Goku. Or if you're a shadow monk, that's an assassin or ninja type thing. How did you find your focus to become one with the element of shadow? Like, what does that process look like? Or even a class like the Druid. I play a Druid in Pete's game, and my character Fox Singer, I use my Ojibwe teachings to connect and speak with animals. And I've even told them I want a ring of animal friendship or speak with animals. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, because it's a cool role play thing. I have a familiar who I rescued. Well, he's not he's a partner, and his name is Myingan, and he's a winter wolf. And I put my life on the line, not because I thought it'd be cool to get a winter wolf companion, because my character as a druid saw an imbalance in nature, and he was not going to let that stand. And because I took that character trait, I turned it into a powerful role-play moment. Now I have an awesome winter wolf who will tank with me. I shouldn't even take the Beastmaster subclass, but I'm doing it because it's role-play focused. I don't care about what it offers me mechanically. I care because it gives my character depth. It gives me a reason to adventure, because I have promised this fictional being that you're a part of my pack. I stood on the line for you. You do the same for me. And we're in it till the end, whatever that may be. And I think that's a powerful role-play moment. That being said, we have to take our final break here on the show. This has been a really insightful conversation. We got more suggestions and more examples of how you can become a better role-play without being cast on Critical Role. We will be back right here on CFRU. This is 93.3 Guelph Community Radio. I'm Mike, that's Damien, and we will be right back on the most powerful podcast and radio show this side of the planet. We'll be back right after this.
Hi, this is Kevin Bright and the Upper York Mandolin Orchestra, and you're listening to CFRU 93.3 in Guelph.
Welcome back to the Spellbook, right here on 93.3 CFRU Guelph Community Radio, as we talk about making your character more than just a stat block. So, now, we've gone over a lot of different ways that you can make your PC as, you know, come to life, as it were, more than just a collection of numbers on a PC. I think we should probably spend a little bit of time here talking about the same thing with your NPCs. Because that is one thing that I've noticed in my experience that a lot of GMs tend to skimp on. And it makes sense. As a GM, you are literally everyone else in the world. People only have so much mana to spend, and sometimes GMing just takes a lot of it. But you also want your NPCs and your bad guys to be more than just, a stat block for your players to roll over. Do those henchmen that your PCs are fighting fight to the death? Are they, maybe those bandits that your low-level PCs encounter on the roadway, maybe at one point in time they were soldiers. How would they act differently from the typical bandit in that case, Steve?
Yeah, because like when you look at NPCs and even monsters and NPCs, they all have motivation. For example, our game that we're currently playing in, I have them in the Feywild right now, and they've run into a creature that is unlike anything any of them has ever encountered before. It's a creature that feeds on dreams, and they are trying to protect their food source, which is the dreams of sleeping children. And these monsters, they're not going to hurt them because they want to protect these kids because they're their food. Now, they're not hurting them. In fact, it's been very clearly said they only feed on people whose lives are miserable. So in exchange for a lifetime of eternal slumber and pleasant dreams, the monsters get to live, and the person who's having the really bad time in the real world, they get to live in a world of endless fantasy. And is that necessarily right or wrong? Well, that's an alien motivation to most people, but it's something you can understand because in a way, these monsters see these kids as food, but that's not evil necessarily. And when your group had attacked these creatures, they said, please don't, we're only trying to survive. And you guys were like, wait, what? And it was something that was different. And think about the amount of times, like when we played Star Trek, for example, at the university at GriffCon a couple weeks ago, how many of those NPCs were like, wait a second, what is going on here? Like there was always a reason and a logic. And when you're playing these NPCs in your world, give them a personality. Not every bandit's going to fight to the death. Like even, again, going back to our game, the D&D game, when you fought that troll under the bridge, he just wanted food and tribute. When you beat him up, he's like, please don't kill me. Yeah. Like he begged for his life. And that troll, for all you knew, was very childlike. He didn't want to kill anybody. He might beat you up really badly, but he wanted your shiny things. And you guys marched to his door so much so he ran inside and locked the door. He's like, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Take whatever you want. And he threw out the bag of all the shiny things. And I like that. Like, I love it when you said, or maybe those bandits are former guards. Maybe somebody screwed him. Or with your bad guy, they're not just twirly mustache, snidely whiplash, they have to have a motivation for what they're doing. And maybe there's a way to connect with them. I'm not saying every bad guy's going to be, willing to sit down and have, tea and crumpets with you. Sometimes they're Jason Voorhees and they just want to kill.
Yeah.
But other times they're Jigsaw from Saw. Other times they are Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, and you can talk to them and you can maybe turn them into allies or at least rivals. Like when you say people skimp on NPCs, you're so right, because we're going to fight to the death and that's the end of it. Like you want to give your NPCs unique personalities, give them traits. Like for example, I think you may have noticed this when we play. A lot of my NPCs speak very fast. They're very goofy. Some of them are very logical. Some of them are very sarcastic. But I think in the terms of the one family unit that you saw, the brother's the dim-witted moron. The sister clearly loves her brother, but she's like, if you could shut up for 5 minutes, that'd be awesome. And you see it's a family unit, but when the trouble comes down, they're both going to have each other's backs. And it's little moments when you create your NPCs with memory, with memorable traits. Even when you went into town, this blacksmith is like, I don't know what I'm doing. They sent me here. They gave me a bunch of gold. Can you help me? And you said, hey, why not?
Yeah. And like, and that actually is a great example. And that's something that I like to do in so many of the games that I play, especially if I'm playing a character similar to Tinker. Is okay, let's interact with the NPCs in the area. Let's make a reason for the GM to make this character more interesting.
Yeah, like I think in our game, for example, I think one of the best characters we created was the drunk bard. Like she was having a great time playing her butt off, playing the piano, but she got a little too liquored up and you guys had to help her home. And you brought her back to her room at the inn and she's like, hey, I owe you guys a favor. Thank you for being gentlemen and gentle ladies and helping me home. And that created a relationship because the innkeeper where this woman was staying at, this bed and breakfast, is like, hey, you did this girl a good solid. When you need help, you can call on me. I know you're good people. Because when you let your characters become more, that's deeper interactions with your NPCs. And you want to make your NPCs memorable. They're not just going to walk around like The Legend of Zelda, I am air, or isn't it a great day? And you go up and talk to them again. Isn't it a great day? Like RPGs are not video games and they're going to have dialogue.
Yeah. Now I do think, to play kind of devil's advocate here, I think part of the reason why some GMs are a little more reticent to flesh out NPCs more is kind of the Boblin the Goblin problem.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Well, it's a lot to keep track of. And as soon as the party gets attached to an NPC, that NPC will either A, end up being one of the strongest NPCs in the world because the party is going to do everything they can to protect them. Or B, that NPC will end up coming along for the ride. Or C, both.
Yeah. And that's always problematic because again, now you're introducing more work for you as the DM, which is, sometimes it's fun, but I find, at least in your game, I'm actually experimenting with something because in our game, I've established you're in a village in its infancy. So you're building up there's not too many shops. There's not too many NPCs. In fact, when this particular season end, I'll tell you how I'm naming these NPCs. You'll get a kick out of it once I tell you, if you haven't kind of picked up on it yet. But everybody has a distinct personality, and I think that's the big thing. You want to have your NPCs be memorable. You want to have them be fun. But a trick, it's kind of a hack that like you can do. If you don't want to name your character Boblin the Goblin or whatever, find a character, like let's say they find a shopkeeper and this character's gonna come back. Find someone from popular culture who just fits this. Like, for example, this is gonna be terrible and you're gonna make fun of me for this so friggin' bad. You go into a store like, hi, welcome to the store. You would like to buy potions, yes? Suddenly, Christopher Walken is now selling you items. Yeah. But that's something you can rely on because people know, like, oh, it's Christopher Walken. I know that guy. Or something like that. Or, welcome, and suddenly, Arnold Schwarzenegger is selling them armaments or something like that. Use pop culture. Why the hell not? And
yeah, exactly.
Like, if you can do a funny impression, or I'm not saying you have to be like, D&D's catalog of crazy characters, but make your characters fun. Like I said, just pick someone. Like, I'm not saying, Jimmy Fallon is running the fruit stand, but, why the hell not? Just pick something, make it fun, make it memorable. And if you remember, oh yeah, Christopher Walken runs the potion shop, now you've got material to work from. So we are just in the closing minutes of the show. So I guess, Damien, final bits of advice for people who want to be more than scribbles on a Yahtzee sheet.
You want to make sure that your character has some sort of motivation, be it PC or NP, whether it's something from their past or something they want to do in their future. Either way, if you stick to that and flesh that out, the stats on the sheet are going to end up being secondary for the part.
I would very much agree, because you're more than just your to hit bonus. You're more than just your spell save DC. And my piece of advice is look at what you're playing. What does that class do? If you're a bard, how do you embrace that? If you're a cleric, how do you embrace that? If you're anything, why do you do what you do? If you followed a calling to adventure, what does that look like? And if you can use that to create some powerful stories with you and your friends, awesome. I'm not expecting you to be Matt Mercer right out of the gate. Nobody is. But what I am expecting you to do is to take this as seriously as you want, because I want to give you a good time, because that's what we're all here for. We're not all here for a long time. We're here for a good time. So what's going to be coming up on the show next week? I don't know, but we will figure that out. Once again, if you want to get in touch with us, the Spellbook Show at gmail.com. We're both available on Blue Sky. Be sure to check out our posts on thisweekingeek.net for more information. So for the Spellbook on here on CFRU, we have been...
I have been Damien, also known as Magical Hat.
I am Mike the Birdman, saying be excellent to each other. Please do not forget to check out freerpgday.com. Find your local participating retailer, and we will catch you next time right here on Guelph Community Radio.
It's not enough. We have a gallery of villains to look out for, but now we could be infiltrated by a shape changer. I can't even tell if any of you are acting strange because you've been replaced or because this group is full of weirdos.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Spellbook. If you happen to have any comments or suggestions, please send us an email at thespellbookshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're hungry for more, you can find Mike at thisweekingeek.net, covering a variety of nerdy topics, and Damien on YouTube at Magical Hack Makes for more TTRPG conversation.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.